get everyone. Oh, there we go. Here's Dave. And yeah, I think we are ready to go. Everything is recording. So Joey, nice to have you back. I did a double on you, which was I've been mixing up times and doing Corona cocktails, and
yes.
But it's good to have you back. Dave is here as well. So Dave, welcome to our little Zoom after show where you get to meet some of our regulars.
Oh, I love it. It's a little bit more many to many as opposed to one to many or two to many.
Yeah. It was great today, Dave. Thank you so much for everything. You covered so many things today. And Joseph knows I always take notes. My notes today have me playing my guitar and you on drums back there in the back. You can just barely see yourself, but
Oh, I appreciate that, Tom. Tom, where are you and who are you?
I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina, Dave. I was a first generation person in my family to ever go to college. I went to UNC Chapel Hill on a scholarship, then went to Yale on a fellowship and taught at Notre Dame for 15 years. And 25 years ago, I resigned my full professorship to be a public philosopher. So I've given over 1,200 talks to Fortune 500 companies and global trade associations and written books like If Aristotle Ran General Motors and True Success and The Stoic Art of Living. And one of my good friends is a guy who's been sending me his books over the years.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, our friend John, which I've got a Zoom coming up with him sometime in the next few days about his new book. So I was thrilled to hear you were going to be on today. Oh, look, Joseph, more airtime. Socrates in Silicon Valley. What was the other one?
Plato's Lemonade Stand.
Yeah.
And soon we'll be collaborating on our first book, which we're calling Frog Philosophy.
Frog Philosophy. Yeah. But Dave, it was so wonderful for us to discover you today and all the amazing stuff you're doing. I just have one question. Will you adopt me as your brother? Because I want to be part of this journey, man. It's very exciting.
I appreciate it. I appreciate that there was some value in it for you, given that you are a philosopher by trade. You know, you bring a little bit more acuity to the game than I think that most of the folks I hang out with. So,
well, yeah, you know, it's funny, but we philosophers, at our best, always learn from other people who are doing other things. Otherwise, we get in a bubble. And for the past 100 years, that's what a lot of European and American philosophy has been. It's been life in a bubble, devoid of separated from the general culture. So when businesses, I was a philosophy of religion. I didn't do anything about business. So when business people started asking me, hey, did the great philosophers say anything about success? How about partnership? How about ethics? How about purpose? Rather than saying, well, I have no idea, I said, well, let me look into that. So now it's just been an unexpected career of meeting people like you and just being able to see how the richness of world thought and all our wisdom traditions applies to life in the present and how we best use the wisdom of the past to move into the future. It's very exciting for me. So
yeah, well, I mean, this is one of those pivotal moments. You can see it'll be a step change function to a higher order, or it'll be a collapse into chaos, and both have happened many times in human history.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, just today listening to you talk, it reminded me how the health of any of us depends on the wealth of many of us. And that we need to rethink. You know, I've mentioned on this after show before with other guests how Adam Smith, who wrote The Wealth of Nations, wrote a book about virtue before that. He seemed to have in mind a broader concept of human flourishing. And we've let it all devolve into just business as a money machine rather than as an engine for human good. And it's almost now like we had to hit bottom with that wrong conception before people's eyes would open to what it really can be.
Why do you suppose that is? Like, what caused us to fall away from it? I mean, I have my own theories, but I'd love to know.
Yeah, it is interesting, right? Because before John Locke, for example, philosopher John Locke, who was really important to our founding fathers in this country, Before Locke, there wasn't a really robust conception of private property.
Right.
And when you get Adam Smith and you get John Locke, you get this capitalism and you get the idea of private property, then it can easily be a, hey, here's how I can do well in the world.
Yeah.
And, you know, Adam Smith, people don't know, he only mentioned the invisible hand, I think once in the book. But that's what everybody depends on, that all of us chasing our selfish ends, somehow there's going to be this alchemy that makes everything better for all of us because of all this aggregated selfishness.
Yeah.
And so that's like a, yeah, go do whatever you want. Yeah, you know, take as much of the loot as you can get.
Yeah.
And yet we see where that leads, to a despoiling not just of the world, but of human community in the world. So now guys like you who are actually out there doing the consulting, bringing the right ideas to business creators and those who operate businesses, it just couldn't be more exciting for me. I just got to live another 100 years so I can see how it all's going to play out.
That's lovely. That's lovely. Very cool.
Jen, can I assume you're about to say something because you unmuted yourself?
Oh, yeah. Well, I hope that the wind background isn't too much, so mute me if that happens again. But I was thinking, and first, thanks very much, Dev, and can't wait to read your book because it's something that I've tried to promote in my life and in my work, which is that branding is not a marketing thing, it's a business thing. Unless the whole organization embraces it, it won't work. And now we're at a time when it won't work for just your humanity, just for your ability to live a healthy life. You know, and your parting words to the show itself, to take care of oneself, is so not just beautiful, but so important, like the oxygen before you give it to your child. It's just, there's a common sense that's coming over us. And I hope that Tom becomes our first chief philosophy officer, you know, at some company, because we need that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, well said, right? I think that we're at this moment in time, right, where things are actually going to move and we're going to restructure, we're going to do something different and cool, or not, right? But you know, part of and you pronounce it Jan or Jan? I don't want to mispronounce your.
Jan, right?
Either way, but Jan is fine.
All right. Well, so no, but yeah, to your point on that, right, which is that it, you know, even something like branding is not a marketing activity, right, or that it's a business activity. I mean, I think you could do a whole show on that. Maybe you already have, Joseph, right? But just the idea that in an age of extreme transparency, right, you cannot broadcast things that are inauthentic to who you are and what you are. People can see right there. You might say, like, I'm all for sustainability in the environment. Then I get online and I Google you and I find you've been dumping stuff in the East River and we're done. And it doesn't matter how much money you spent on PR, right?
Exactly. I think the idea of going into philosophy traditionally has been something that has been looked down upon by parents of those children who do it, and by society, because it doesn't make money. It doesn't seem to make money. It didn't have importance. But the idea of being philosophical, of having a soul in your business, and by the way, it can make money, in a create wealth kind of way, a positive way. It is time for that, and it needs to, I think, to be institutionalized beyond just talking about it. And if it doesn't happen now, I don't know when it's going to happen. I was going to ask you, what are your greatest challenges at Jump? What organizations don't seem to get it? And have you ever turned down work because you realize they don't get it and it's just not going to work?
Yeah, well, I mean, on some level, nobody gets it, but that's why you do the work, right? I mean, I think that that's why you're here, right? For me to complain that companies aren't empathic or companies aren't innovative, that's like a doctor complaining damn it, I spent all my days with sick people. It's like, yes, that's why they need you. You know what I mean? Right? And so you have to have that mindset on it, which is, you ask a great question, because it's, I think about like 10 years ago, I woke up and I just really had a kind of a crisis of confidence where I realized like I hated all my clients. Like I worked with all these CEOs, they're all a bunch of selfish dickheads. I hate them, right? And you think about it, you analyze it, you realize, no, actually, they can't all be jerks. Really, the common denominator is me, right? I need to change my attitude, right? This is a profound lack of compassion, right? And that realization took me like a year and a half. It wasn't that quick, right? Oh. But the realization that, like, no, look, these are all just human beings who are trying to get through the day, right? And at the top of companies, many of them, guys, right, are just like 13-year-old boys in big man outfits. You know what I mean? They look like, they look like, 60-year-old man, but inside they're still the 13-year-old boy doing stuff for 13-year-old boy reasons and motivation.
You might have.
That's profound. Go ahead.
You might have like actually changed, like just in that statement, changed like a career path for me or a direction because you know what, amidst this whole period of time with and going through this CoronaTV transformation, I've been saying, I hope I never consult. I hope I never spend another day of my life consulting for another client, because life is short, and it's almost that dickhead, statement when I realize that maybe it's not them and maybe it's me in terms of not being able to. And so I really love that point, which is when you said, funnily enough, when I'm asked this question a lot, which is who's doing a great job out there? My answer is always, no one is doing a great job, and those that you think are doing a great job just have great PR departments. That's my canned response. But I mean, I think that was very profound, which is to realize that that the change has to come from within. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful insight. The doctor complaining about working with sick people.
And Joseph,
that's analogy.
And Joseph,
that's the metaphor. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. When I was a teenager, I stopped going to church for a few years, and my father said, "Why don't you go to church anymore?" And I said to him, "The church is full of hypocrites." And he said, "Can you think of a better place for them to be?"
Exactly.
And one time I'd given about 800 talks on ethical success, and another philosopher came to me and said, "Do you think that some of these companies are just hiring you as window dressing? They're just running the ethics flag up the flagpole and saying to people, see, we care about this stuff, but it's completely hypocritical." And because of my dad, I said, "Well, I don't have any evidence that that's happened yet, but if it does, those are people I need to talk to." More than anybody else, right? And it's your insight, Dave, that's so important for us to, and that's crucial to the servant mentality. I mean, all my clients are not there for me, I've got to be there for them. I've got to turn those tables around. I've got to turn my telescope around. I've got to change my perspective. And your way of saying it was really beautiful. So thanks for that.
Well, I appreciate that. But Bob, I saw your face, kind of nod when I mentioned the C word. Compassion, right?
I just got off a call with the Vermont Democratic Party doing a debriefing from a big online event that we did a couple weeks ago, and one of the things that kept coming up, and I emphasized it at each opportunity, was the transparency, and which for me kind of rides on the compassion end of it. The party nationally has become sort of isolated, and you take the information from on high and bring it down. And what we're finding is that we are resonating with our audience as we start from the bottom and work up. And so we're trying to figure out ways that we can help people understand that we're just a group of people, the Vermont Democratic Party. We're just a group of people doing our best to do better in the world, and here are examples of it. And so the compassion from the party's perspective towards our constituents is really what that's what I'm trying to influence in what's going on in Vermont right now. It's a small enough state, there's 630,000 of us here, and I know most everybody, or they know me. And so having compassion and working with people where they are, I think is just so critical.
Yeah, and
So
hard
that's what
too,
resonated.
right? It's so simple. I keep, because I teach all these classes on empathy and stuff like that, and people are like, well, so you're the guru of that. I'm like, well, I'm a teacher of empathy, but I'm a student of compassion.
Yeah.
Right? Because
Good one.
that's a much harder gig, figuring that out.
For real.
Oh, I love that. And by the way, I was talking about in my soliloquy about these 3 different behaviors or aspects of doing the show every day. And one of them, as I said, is the common threads. I'm always, and these guys know this, it's always interesting when one of my guests takes the time to go around the room. It doesn't happen often.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't happen often. It's maybe 1 in 10, maybe a little bit more, where they take the time to say, oh, and we've got Bob here. And you actually became the host. You're like, Bob, I see you nodding.
Oh, sorry.
No, we love that.
I know, I love that.
Yeah.
They know that I love that. I love it when I get hijacked by my own guests, because it means they're comfortable enough to, to like, sometimes they'll look at the comments coming in and they'll go, oh, that's an interesting point from Tom. And I'm like, I haven't even put on the screen yet. Allow me to do my thing.
And Dave and Joseph, I know you know this, but Dave, you probably won't know it. Joseph Dumont, who's also silently on the screen here, he shared with me a book manuscript he's written. That's an amazing book about his travel, his adventure through the world you talked about, of all these CEOs and all these business leaders who are the 13-year-old kids going crazy with their new toys and with their new power, which, as we know, affects the brain in various ways. Sure. And Joey, Mr. Joseph Dumont here, Joey is a guy who's come through that process and been transformed. So he was able to move out of it and reflect back on it. So when you and I go to deal with these people who are just all about flash and cash and their power and their houses and their planes and stuff, there's hope that they can come out of this. There's hope that they can really discover, what they're truly capable of doing. And that's such a motivator for me. I've been really fortunate. I'm an unusual public speaker. I mostly get invited by CEOs and chairmen rather than by meeting planners. And so I've gotten to know a lot of these folks, and even the ones that I would come home and say to my wife, well, I really liked him, but I'm glad I don't work for him. Even those guys, over time, I've seen they can often grow, so there's so much in what you're doing. And I'm just glad to know you're out there doing it, man.
I appreciate it. Joseph, we're talking about you like you're not in the room.
Yeah.
No, well, thanks. Oh, thank you, Tom. Yeah, I become friends with everyone here. Joseph and I worked together in the media business for years. And my last 4 years actually was in conscious consumerism. I worked for 3 sustainable scientists. They started a company called Ecosphere, and our goal was to align eco-friendly companies that were doing something either ethically, environmentally, or socially responsible. And then we were building a platform of companies that did that for conscious consumers. So it stemmed from a documentary that my partners and I shot in 2012 called The Naked Brand. And it was all about how social technology was transforming brand communication due to access to information specific to what you said. So if someone says, I'm doing something environmentally friendly, and you Google them and say, well, no, you're not. And we thought that would transform brand marketing forever. We were about maybe 15 years ahead of us on that theory. And then to Tom's point, those pieces and parts kind of connected to my life, because what we realized shooting the documentary is that you need to tell honest stories about honest companies moving forward. That was the best way to do our job.
Yeah.
And then I started, I need to do that with myself too.
Yeah.
And I grew up representing, or actually my heroes were assholes. And so it's one of those things when you look up, to.
We're assholes. That's great.
That's his next book. I can hear it now.
That's the title.
But it's too good to be the book title. It's better as like the first sentence of the first chapter.
The grabbing first sentence, right?
You know, like it was the best of times. It was the worst.
It was
of
the worst
times.
of times.
My
Heroes were assholes.
My heroes were assholes.
And by the way, the series on Amazon called The Boys. That's exactly that's the premise, right?
Wow.
Superheroes being absolute assholes.
I don't know that one yet.
How were your heroes assholes though? Like, tell me about that.
Well, if you look up to people. So in college, I read The Art of the Deal, and I thought that was a fantastic book. You know, it was 1986.
Yeah.
And not only did I didn't understand at the time that he didn't write. I didn't understand at the time that he didn't read. I didn't understand at the time that he inherited all of his wealth. I just didn't get it, right? And then as I grew into the industry, I worshiped Steve Jobs until we worked with him. And you know, Elon Musk and Larry Ellison, you know, the kind of the old guard as far as the way they treated employees, the way they puffed themselves up. It's just tough. And so, you know, now you have guys like Mark Benioff as an example, who's just a little more soft, doing some wonder. I don't mean it in a pejorative manner. I mean, he's there, he's compassionate, he's worried about equality within his corporations. Yvon Chouinard was in our documentary and changed the way I saw business because his passion and his purpose was far bigger than any success that he had with Patagonia. So I think part of, you know, I always say this, my third grader, his teacher won Teacher of the Year in California last year.
Wow.
And he's a wonderful man. And we don't look up to Mr. Lee, right? That's not something that most kids have in their dialogue. They don't say, oh, Mr. Lee's the guy I want to be when I get older. I want to be Steve Jobs or I want to be Elon Musk. And it's not a bad thing to be, you know, want to be a hyper intelligent person like Elon Musk, but how does he treat people? You know, how is he engaging with the world? What is he doing? And I don't mean in the sense of like his environmental policies, because obviously he's trying to do some good there. I just mean, I have friends that work there. I had friends that work at Apple. I worked with Apple as an agency. And how do people treat one another, right? How important is that when you look up to people? And that's an example, even on our body politic today. We have people that you want to look up to, you know, and it's very difficult. So I think that my heroes for assholes kind of thing is more of an issue around what I tried to encapsulate in the book is that, you know, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be macho? What does it mean to be kind? Can we kind of recalibrate what that means moving forward?
Yeah. Wow. That's very cool. You know, Joe, you mentioned The Art of the Deal, and you guys know the backstory on that? Like,
Oh yeah.
I mean, because you know he didn't actually write the book, right? Tony Schwartz wrote the book for him, right? And,
and that's what I think that was the image. And as I mentioned, he doesn't read. So the fact that if you can't read, that's one of the prerequisites to writing. You know, it's difficult to write if you can't read. And so I think I think we're moving in the right direction that way. And I think what you're doing with Jump and the leaders that you're trying to help is fantastic, because we do need to recategorize our heroes.
And Joey and Dave, that was the first business book I ever read. My first time I was asked to speak to a business group, I thought, well, I better read the books they're reading. And that year it was a New York Times bestseller. So I picked up The Art of the Deal, and I picked up the other business bestseller that year, Iacocca.
Oh yeah.
And I said, okay, I do need to go talk to these people.
Did you ever read Tony Schwartz's second book?
Which one?
What Really Matters?
You know what? I may have it, but I don't think I've read it.
By the way, y'all should read that. If there's a book I'd recommend, and Joseph, maybe you should get Tony on this, you know, thing. I think he'd be a great person to talk to. But Tony Schwartz, and he was still, he was like 25 or 30 when he wrote The Art of Deal for Donald Trump, right? He like basically Trump hired him to be a ghostwriter, and Tony Schwartz realized this guy is completely ADD and has nothing going on, and basically wrote the book for him. And you know, you asked Tony, he's like, so Donald Trump didn't write The Art of the Deal? And he's like, Donald Trump hasn't read The Art of the Deal. You know, like,
it's true. It's true.
Right? But what he did, which was really smart, is, you know, usually when you're a ghostwriter, you get paid, you know, like, I'm going to pay you $50,000 and you're going to write the book. And he took nothing and instead took a percentage of the royalties. He took a cut. Right. So Tony became a very, very rich man very quickly based on The Art of the Deal. Right. And then he turned around. He's like, what do I want to? And he was a staff writer for New York Magazine, and he quit New York, and he said, what do I really want to study? And he wanted to study, what is all this hippie new age stuff? So he went to Esalen, and he hung out with Baba Ram Dass, and he talked to Timothy Leary. And he basically, what really matters is a Cook's tour of Eastern philosophy and new age movement and everything brought back for the rest of us.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Oh, and that's an amazing book, right?
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, because that's a big piece of what Tom was talking about. I went through that metamorphosis when I studied Eastern philosophy. Paramahansa Yogananda was one of the first people that really intrigued me. And I not only read his autobiography of a yogi, but I actually read his translation of the Bhagavad Gita, which was beautiful and wonderful. And the stories within that changed my life. And that I wrote about that as well. I think those types of things, when you start to look past yourself, for any reason, it really helps you take yourself less seriously. And to your point, focus on empathy and compassion versus what's in it for me.
And Joey, the thing about that book, that was the only book Steve Jobs read cover to cover every year of his life. And Isaacson tells us that in the big biography. Yeah, but Isaacson never says a word more about the book. So as soon as I read Isaacson, I went out and got the book right away and read it twice through. And I said, okay, all the stuff that doesn't make any sense in Steve Jobs' life suddenly makes sense. But because of that book, he was modeling himself not after Aurobindo, but after his mentor, his teacher, who was the tough love guy, the in-your-face guy, the insults guy, right? And then why did he have no furniture in his house for such a long time? And why did he? I mean, so many things are made sense of by that book.
So I want to. You guys are all gonna go boo boo to me because we're approaching 30 minutes, and I've tried.
We need a
I mean, Dave has given me almost 2 hours of his time, but there are a couple of things. One is the whenever anyone recommends a book on the show, I give them homework and challenge them to say, can you help get him on the show for me? So if you choose to take up the mission, that would be awesome. I say that somewhat tongue in cheek.
You want me to get this guy? He may not be with us anymore.
There's my dude.
Hang on a second. Hold on a second. Has he got a Twitter handle?
So they had it in 1952 when he decided to check out. And just a cool story on Paramahansa. Paramahansa announced his death.
Yeah.
Oh, no kidding.
He announced his death. He said, I'm going to die on Tuesday, 1952, on March 13th. And he laid down and he died in front of his worshipers.
Wow.
I'll never forget that guy. He was like my dude.
But you can't get him on the show though.
I can't.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. There are parts of his
maybe in his reincarnated form.
Yeah, right. It may be
Joey's
going to be on the show.
Say.
I love that you brought up that book, Joey, because that autobiography of the yogi was the book that growing up, my parents, because my parents are from India, they're like they were like, you need to read this book. You need to, and it's like anything your parents do, you're like
right.
And it's only like after 40, you come back and you're like, shit, I should have been listening to these.
Oh. Right. Yeah. I just read it again about 2 years ago, and I read it the first time when I was 30. So 23 years in between readings, but I still it's just a really phenomenal book.
I feel sad that I've muted Tom and I've muted Joey, and I'm taking advantage now of this is what's called basic abuse of power. But I'm going to.
Absolute
you can unmute yourselves again, guys. It was just a joke. Dave, I want to say a couple things. One is what a fantastic conversation, even right at the end, just rich stuff. The thing I wanted to, I'm just going to plant a seed now on something I want to think about too, which is, I don't know who it was. One of these guys came up and we're talking about Chainsaw L Dunlap.
Yes.
And so we talk about all of these leaders, right? These generations of leaderships from being these absolute, beyond sons of bitches and, SOBs second to none. And then you look at the Elon Musks and the Steve Jobs, almost segueing into certainly, Steve Jobs not being a great guy, but these guys are endangered species, which is visionaries. And the questions we always ask ourselves is, to be an effective leader, whether you're the CEO of a country or the CEO of a company, is it okay? Is it possible? Is it excusable to be a bad person as well? And then now here we have this beautiful conversation about servant leadership and conscious capitalism. And of course, the question, just to like put the bow on it, will come down to this idea of, can you do all of the, can you effectively run a company? Can you effectively be a capitalist? Can you do all of things and be a good person, you know, and not be branded as socialist? These are the questions of the time and the questions of our time. And we will continue to think about it. Maybe through Tony Schwartz we'll continue it. If he does come on the show, you have to come back. I just want to thank you, and I'm going to give you the invitation that we give all of our guests here, which is you are welcome, and Vanessa is welcome anytime. You are now part of our family. The after show is very, very small and intimate and special, and you're welcome to come back on any given day if you feel like just hanging out with us or riffing on a subject or looking at who the speaker is. It would be our honor to continue the association, just like it was for Tom to come aboard as one of my previous speakers.
Well, thank you for having me, guys. And I have to tell you, like, I love talking with you in the conversation, but I really, really, really love the after party here. It's just it has filled me up, and I learned so much from all of you. You know, Stephen, I didn't get to hear a thing from you, but we'll have to do that another day.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I was going to say that Joseph even allows conservatives to be part of this group.
Who asked the question of, do you have to be a conservative to be a capitalist?
He did.
I did.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
And he also reminded me, because actually when I became a citizen, Stephen and his beautiful wife Tony met us at the Capitol in Hartford, and we actually got to meet the Secretary of State, and we met one of our senators, a Democrat, and one of the highlights. I've never told you guys this story. We went into the House that was in session. Just 2 or 3 of people that had just been sworn in, and someone in the House asked for the floor and announced to the Speaker that the country's newest citizens had just walked into the room, and I remember the Speaker said, "You guys are so special and so incredible. You want to know why?" And we looked, and they said, because most of us in this room, we didn't get a choice. We didn't get to choose to become an American citizen. You guys made that decision. And they all stood up and they applauded. And I will never forget that moment for the rest of my life, for what Mr. Rubin and Mr. and Mrs. Rubin did for us. But they also told us in the comments that I can't be deported now. So that's even more important.
Right.
So,
I'll never forget that day. It was wonderful. And as much as you make it beautiful, it was even more beautiful.
Well, thank you, guys. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks.